welcome to I Make Stuff. This week we're going to be playing with something that all of us have probably played with when we were younger. It is known by different names. For the most part, it is widely known as Perler beads. Perler beads are actually fused beads, and Perler is a big brand. Another brand would be ArtCal, you have Hama, you also have Walmart and Michaels, who have their own brands that they sell. All of these beads are different quality though, so you cannot really mix and match. I have ArtCal and Perler, and they're almost the same in terms of quality and melting point, so those are the beads that I actually use. I came across a streamer named One Up Girl a few months ago, and she was using Perler beads to create different very geeky art, and I wanted to do the same, so I bought myself all of these ArtCal beads, and I also bought Perler beads that were on sale on clearance actually with Michaels. So what we're going to do today, what I actually saw on Pinterest, was someone had created little designs with the Perler beads and then put them inside resin. So I'm going to be making a resin coaster with Perler beads or fused beads inside the resin. I already have my designs picked out, and it is actually Lilo and Stitch. You guys know that I love Lilo and Stitch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up the table, and then we're going to start with my design. Okay, so here are my Perler mini beads. So these are the smaller versions of the beads. I have my board all set up. The blue underneath is actually painter's tape. So it's actually 4 boards all together. And I am going to just start and put beads onto the pegboard, and we're going to make the 2 designs that I'm going to make coasters out of. Now that we have the Perler beads on the board and I have my iron turned on, I have parchment paper which I'm going to cover the designs with, and then I'm going to melt them together. I'm going to put the iron on top for about 10 to 15 seconds, and then I'm going to remove it. I'm only going to iron one side because I don't really want it to be melted on both sides, so that when I put it in the resin, it'll look pretty nice. Now I'm going to wait for it to cool, and then I'm going to peel off the parchment paper. Now that the perler beads have been melted, I'm going to start mixing my epoxy. I have Promarine epoxy, it's 1-to-1 epoxy, and I am going to pour it into this disposable cup and mix it in a silicone cup. I have to make sure that when I pour the 2 parts, I get the same amount for each. I only need a little bit, so I'm just going to now pour this in. I also have a silicone mixing spoon. Just a little note as I'm working with this resin. I actually had this in a room that was very warm. Since it is the summer out, it is a lot easier for me to keep the resin warm, whereas before when I was working with it, it was during the winter time. So now I'm going to slowly mix the 2 parts together. By slowly mixing it, I reduce the chance of having bubbles as I cure the resin. I also have a heat gun that I'm going to blow over the resin as it's curing to help release some of the bubbles that get stuck. Now that the resin has been mixed and I have my designs, I'm going to pour a little bit of the resin inside the mold first, and then I am going to place the perler beads inside. I'm going to use my heat gun, and I'm going to try to get some of these bubbles out as well. I want to make sure that I get every inch covered. Now that most of the bubbles are out of the resin, I'm going to place my perler design inside. I have my perler bead inside the resin now, and what we're going to do is we're going to let it cure for about a day, and then we'll come back to it. So after 24 hours in the mold, I was able to pop it out, and it is hard. I made sure that the proportions for the 2 parts for my resin were correct. So that's one. I do still have little bubbles that I can't figure out how to get rid of. I hope one day I will be able to figure out a way for me to get rid of all the bubbles. I have seen people use vacuum chambers, so maybe that's an option. So I actually also made another one off camera. This one is to match it, so if you guys can see, is Lilo and Stitch. So all I have to do is pop it out of the mold, and there you go. These would be the 2 coasters that I made. So the perler's inside, and then I have the resin covering it. So I did have some problems with Stitch. He kept floating up, and I had to keep pushing it down. And there's some parts where it is not smooth. So I have to figure out a way to make sure that the perlers I put into the resin don't float up. But we're gonna try this again another time with other perlers. And until then, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.